just come across with a question of what role would you reckon your guys or all other unions could play in that?
I think there are a number of things we can do. Firstly, for example, in my own industry, in construction, there are many Iranian immigrants in Australia that have come here as refugees and otherwise that work in our industry, in the painting industry particularly, the tiling industry. So I think our first step should be to engage with those workers here, learn about what they've come from, what they've suffered. Then to educate our other members in this plight, because I think that's very important as well. But then also to look where we might be able to use the various forums in which we speak, such as in the political space or in the public space, about highlighting these injustices, and then hopefully then lobbying, the Iranian government via letters or other things to see a change in the approach of the government to workers. And Australia is a place of refuge, and to the extent that it can also provide refuge for people who are treated badly, we should continue to do so as well. So it's a sort of a multifaceted approach that we can take, but we should work towards a peaceful solution to these problems.
Are you necessarily saying on that question, are you necessarily saying that educating the members, for example your members, is considered to be a part of that?
I think so. I think you can't fight these things alone, and often people are disengaged with what happens in other countries because Australia has a very high standard. We can be very, very focused on what's happening in our own backyard, but we should be educating workers here that they are part of a global group of workers, that collectively they can make a difference. And as you expose these injustices, people condemn these injustices, and slowly things will change. But I think it's very important that it's not just seen as a union official thing. It should be about workers here supporting workers in Iran or other places to get the sort of freedoms and benefits that we have in Australia. And sometimes we take those freedoms for granted.
Right. Given your guys' experiences, could you just, I'll leave it in your capable hand, tell our viewers what is the way out for the workers in Iran and generally for the people of Iran?
Well, I can't pretend to tell the people of Iran what to do. I mean, I've not been to Iran, and I know that there are many cultural differences between Australia and Iran. But, I would hope that by our solidarity and the support of the other unions and other progressive groups in Australia, that it gives them the strength to continue the struggle, to continue to advocate in their country for change, knowing that they actually have the support of people in other parts of the world who are also wanting them to, have the sort of freedoms and rights that we enjoy in Australia, which are under attack even in Australia. I mean, even a country like Australia, there are conservative forces at play that want to see destruction of good conditions and a taking away of people's rights, and that's particularly happening in the construction industry in Australia, where special laws are trying to be passed through Parliament which will reduce the rights that building workers have in this country to organise and be members of strong militant unions. But we'd say to the workers of Iran not to lose heart, that these rights are really important, and all of the people that I've met, Iranian activists and others that I've met are very determined, so I think that people won't lose heart. But I think it must help them to know that there are workers and unions and others in other parts of the world who are supporting their struggle.
You know that the United States, together with the together with the right-wing Iranian groups, organizations, trying to domesticating a function of within the Iranian government to impose a regime change to Iranian and the workers in Iran. How much would you reckon that this change would make the social and political to the life of the social and political in Iran?
Well, I don't know, and when countries like the United States try and impose from the outside solutions to problems that have existed, for example, in the Middle East. They tend not to be very successful, and they create a whole bunch of other problems. So I don't think imposing anything on anybody is really the right answer. I'm not an expert in the political, I guess, struggles that are going on necessarily in Iran in very minute sense. But you would hope that countries like Australia and the US would actually support what the people want, and that people should determine their own destiny. And if there is a view amongst the people about what should or shouldn't occur, then that should be supported rather than trying to impose something externally, because history tends to show that if you try and impose on people some view of the world that a first world country, for example, has, like the United States or Australia, it tends not to fail. It tends not to be a success. So I think that it's better for countries like Australia and the US to use their considerable influence to encourage and support change, but change that the majority of people want to see in Iran. It's not up to me to dictate to the Iranian people what is important to them at the end of the day on how they would like their society to be structured.
Am I right by, I'm sorry, I'm just focusing on the question. Am I right by saying that you're saying, what are you saying is that the involvement by the outsiders, particularly the United States, would only provide chaos?
I don't know if it would only provide chaos. I think if they want to impose things that the people don't accept, then there will be chaos. But if they work with the people and resource the people to come up with whatever it is the Iranian people ultimately see as their see as the way forward, then it can be a force of good as much as it can be a force of bad. But it's if you impose things against people's will that like anything, you don't get the result that you want.
Rita, I hope that you're not making you tired with all the questions
not
that
at all.
You definitely you're chasing up the news, all the things about Iran, and you know that more recently, a revolutionary court sentenced Jafar Azimzadeh, one of the workers' activists, to 6 years jail. And also you've heard Benam Ibrahimzadeh is another workers' activist. Initially he was given 20 years, then in the process of reviewing, according to them, that reduced to 5 years. How would you reckon that we can help them? What is the best to help those desperate workers?
I think the best and really one of the easiest things we can do is expose these stories. If people don't know around the world that these injustices occur, that people are thrown in jail for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, all because they've had the courage to stand up for their fellow workers and their communities and the families of those people that they represent, then people don't know this happens, then that sort of intimidation, that sort of injustice will continue to occur. But if we shine a light on those injustices and we embarrass, I suppose, the state of Iran or whoever, whichever country these things take place, that if we can embarrass them into saying you cannot, as a country in 2015, support laws which repress the right of workers to come together and negotiate and bargain and take industrial action and take strike action where it's appropriate to further their interests, and that if the result of doing that is for people to be thrown into jail, then that is not a good basis for our world to operate. And we need to expose those. And I think that's one of the things that, we're far away from Iran. We can provide maybe some other resources from time to time. But I think exposing these injustices, having people understand what's going on in these other countries, and then using that to try and seek change is one of the best things that we can do.